Hello and welcome to another episode of The Influential Nonprofit. It's me, Marianne, your favorite nonprofit influencer. I am so excited today because I made a new friend and she's on my podcast. This is Joanna Brody. She does like public relations strategy and storytelling for social good. Brody Public Relations strategy and storytelling for social good is a full service agency that works with clients who are making a difference in the world. Yay, because that's who I work with too. Yay. And so here's what I like about this. You're award-winning communication professional with a distinct expertise in social marketing and a passion for promoting causes and issues. Now, this is where it gets interesting. Your influences range from wallowing in trash to wheeling through car-free streets to walking in the footsteps of royalty. So that's quite a swing from trash to royalty. In the true PR fashion, you really do everything. Yep, I mean, there is that umbrella just gets wide all the time. So I used to do PR. I worked in a community here in St. Louis. I was their communications and PR manager, and I did a bunch of stuff. And then I did community engagement. So I worked all through crisis, all of that. And it is a fascinating field. And so we're going to talk today about how nonprofits can better utilize PR, right, in their mix. And okay, now, if you listen to my podcast, you probably know the first question. Yeah. And I always start with the first question. And you said you listened to a couple episodes in prep. So good for you. All right. So tell me something that you're proud of that you don't get to brag about a lot.
Yeah, I have a multifaceted and multi-leveled answer for that. As a PR person, it's actually quite uncomfortable for me to brag about anything related to myself, my work, any of that, because, you know, the PR person is supposed to be behind the scenes, helping to elevate the client, the organization, the nonprofit. So I generally have a trouble bragging to begin with. But as I was thinking about this, some of the work that I'm most proud of is work that no one will ever see. And I'm referring to crisis communications. I know you've done that in your career. And a lot of times in crisis communications, we're planning for an outcome that is under the radar. I can't talk about it. I can't talk about the clients. I can't talk about the success except in vague terms. So, you know, I have worked on many crises. A lot of them recently have tended to be like leadership transitions where maybe the leader wasn't so keen on leaving, but was being asked to leave and that kind of thing. And if the outcome is such that it looks like a smooth transition to the outside public, that's a big success. And on a more fun note, the royalty that I was referring to, which is sort of, you know, my best, most incredible career high, and that one of my colleagues referred to as the PR coup of the century, in that I was, because of some work I had done for an ongoing client, they were tapped to be they were tapped to get visited by the Duke and Duchess of Windsor, by William and Kate. And this is on their inaugural trip to the United States and to Los Angeles in 2011. And it was a very direct result of some hard-earned media attention that I had gotten for this particular client. And the British Council saw it and said, we want to look at you guys. And they came in and said, yes, we want the Duke and Duchess to come here. And after that, it was like an incredible journey of everything in the PR world that you can imagine preparing up for that. And also, I actually also call that crisis PR. When I talk about crisis PR or teach crisis PR, I tell people it's not necessarily something bad that's happening. It's anything that's way out of the ordinary for a nonprofit, you know, which the Duke and Duchess visiting this client was, you know, way out of the ordinary for them.
Yeah, like when I worked for a community called University City. I worked in City Hall, and in the fall of 95, the Clinton Gore campaign did a stop, and they chose this. It's their city hall is this like 8-sided building. It's this beautiful, it's in this really crazy, beautiful historic building. And they're like, can we hold a rally outside? And I was like thrust. I think I was not even 30 years old around then. I was just thrust into this thing, and it was awesome. It wasn't unexpected would be that. And it was before internet, like I'm helping people find phone books and setting up, the White House press corps. Like I'm running around the town because they needed different things, and I knew everybody. So I became like this point person. And then I got to like meet the president and all of that. And it was like, it was really fun. And and it was so unexpected. So I love that. Just, it doesn't have to be, it's not always a crisis, just unexpected. And how can you, and you help them rise to that and have that experience, which is amazing.
It was amazing. And everything was choreographed down to the second. And when I say that, down to the second. I mean, it was so precision, orient. It was great. And we had 3 weeks. We had 3 weeks to prepare. So anyway, it was really fabulous, and it continues to be one of my career highs. So
awesome. All right. So you do work with clients that are making a difference. What made you want to have a business? Like, because you could really serve anyone. So what made you want to have a business that focused on, nonprofits and mission driven or organizations and businesses?
Yeah. So I come from a family of do-gooders. My parents were both in the health field. My father was actually a reconstructive surgeon, and my mom was a occupational therapist and a nurse and a therapist. And they were always doing the good stuff, like going to underdeveloped countries and helping burn victims and doing things like Operation Smile and fixing cleft palates, and I just grew up with that. And so I can't stand the sight of blood. There was no way I was going into the medical field. And I also knew about myself that I'm not a good like one-on-one person. My sister-in-law is a hospice nurse. My other sister-in-law is a pediatrician. Like I'm not good at that stuff. But I also had done a career analysis shortly after I graduated from college, and communications came up as something I should pursue. And I discovered that I can do broad communications and reach a whole mess of people by doing, social marketing, which is a field that existed long before social media. And so social marketing is promoting causes and issues and influencing people to, for behavior change or to support a cause or advocate. So I decided that was the best way for me to combine my desire to do good in the world with my ability to do well in communications.
Okay, I love that story. I also had, and that's my puppy Tina, and
I got two.
And she has to stay in her crate even when I'm talking, so we're just gonna roll through this. So that when I got when I was in college, like my whole life, I was a later in life kid, and I always felt like left out and left behind, and it also gave me a lot of empathy, and help. And I'm like kind of a rescuer by nature. I have kids adopted out of foster care. I have foster puppies. I was an advertising major, and somebody said to me, what are you going to do with all this like social justice passion and advertising? And the thought never crossed my mind. I'm like, that's a stupid question. Like, I remember this, like, it was like 1987. I remember it, like, and I'm like, then I realized I didn't really care about advertising.
Yeah.
And my dad was in advertising, and I wanted to be like him. And I realized I didn't care if you bought Miller or Bud. Sorry, Dad. And like, what do I care about? And that's how I got into nonprofit. And like, people are like, you can't make money. You can't have a career then. Like, yeah. Okay.
Oops. Yes, you can. And then my undergrad degree was in jurisprudence and social policy.
Okay.
And then I worked for a couple of years, and then I went back to grad school to get a degree in communications. And at that point decided I'm going to focus only on causes and issues.
Yeah, and I worked for 16 years for a company called 501 Creative, and all the clients there are all nonprofits, branding, website design, and the founder, when she's founded it in 95, people were like, that's a stupid idea. No one's going to pay you for this. And you know, how many years later and the company exists, and I was there for 16 years and I just loved it. And it's so great to do this work in service of people doing great work.
Yep.
And so with that, let's just shift to PR. Um, you know, I feel like people overemphasize social media in there right now because it's shiny, it's shiny.
Yeah.
So like tell me, why do we need PR in the age of social media?
Really important. Because PR, I believe that PR needs to be approached from all different angles, all different vehicles to use everything at your fingertips to do outreach. And I'll give you a couple of examples. One of my clients, it's the same client with the royalty, is an arts education organization, and had been around for 30 some years, and had a diversified donor base, including some elderly philanthropists. And when I was working with them, at one point they said, why do we have to keep publishing our print newsletter? Can we just go digital? Can we just do our e-news? It saves us a lot of money. And mind you, their print newsletter is gorgeous. It's like, it's worthy of the arts institution that it is.
Right.
And there's fabulous photographs that go with it and everything else. It makes a huge impact. And I said, you've got to keep the print newsletter, because there are, I don't know how many, you have your donor database, I don't know, but I know that there are older people who have money, who are donors and supporters of yours, who do not have social media, who do not open their email, but they open their mail, and they're going to get that newsletter, and they're going to open it up, and it's going to make an impact, and they're going to continue to support you, hopefully. And they're probably some of your biggest donors. So you make the investment in the print media, and the return is pays for itself. That's one example. Another example is actually a very recent thing that happened. I mentioned the wheeling on car-free streets. One of my clients is an organization based in Los Angeles called Stick La Via, and they produce open street events. So they shut down big boulevards for a Sunday, and people can come out in any form of people-powered transportation. Bicycles, skateboards, walking, wheelchairs, strollers, and they're fantastic community events. People love them. They come from all over to do these events. And they spend an inordinate amount of time in advance of each event. So each event is in a different location, throughout Los Angeles. The nonprofit spends an inordinate amount of time in advance doing outreach within the communities that the events are held. And they knock on doors. They knock on doors, they leave flyers, they say, we're coming through, we're going to shut down the street. Thank you for your support. If you have any, they do this extensively in advance of each event. Recently in Los Angeles, we had a very large bridge that was 6 years in the making, billions of dollars. It's an iconic infrastructure project in downtown LA that opened. And they had a big opening weekend where they didn't allow cars on the bridge. People were welcome to come out. This is not my client's event, And the next day after it was reported on in the LA Times, a letter to the editor was published by a local community member who said, we didn't know anything about this event. This is our community. I'm sure there was tons of stuff on social media, but why didn't anybody come knock on our doors? Politicians come knock on our doors. People, if you will, they want us to support a bill. And that was so illustrative to me again of how you need to do it all. You need to use every form of communication, because you're reaching different people and in different ways, and people are going to consume their information in totally different ways. So that's why you need to look at it all. Also, the old-fashioned earned media, publicity, which is very challenging these days. It gets more and more challenging to do. It's still important, because that's that third party stamp of approval, objective news story that will continue to give back to your organization, because you can leverage it long term.
You said that that's getting harder and harder to get that kind of placement.
Yeah.
And I guess because media is shrinking, like traditional media is shrinking.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't even know. Are you still doing press releases and things like that, or helping clients do that? Do people do that anymore?
Oh, yes. Well, again, people will say, why bother? And I'm like, as hard as it is, you have to bother. And no, I've been in this business long enough to remember literally where you would print out a press release, put it in an envelope, address it, and send it. Yeah, send it to, ABC News and the LA Times and the New York Times and whatever. We don't do that anymore. And there's a few exceptions where you do a blanket press release if it's a calendar alert where you're trying to get just information published about your event or whatever. But in terms of pitching stories, no.
So public relations right now, it feels like personal relations, like, right, like where it's more about creating relationships, like, because you're right, your thing about walking through a community, like how important it is to connect with people, not just through social media, but in different ways. And that's I'm hearing that's what you're focusing on.
Yes and no. There's still all the other tools like e-newsletters and website information in addition to social media and publicity and speaking engagements and all the things that have existed for a long time pre-social media that you still need to consider. Now there's one caveat to the PR, to the publicity. If there's not a good story to pitch, then you don't want to expend those resources.
Right.
So there's a difference between sending information out to your community because you want to keep them informed about your nonprofit and you're soliciting donations, or you're just staying in front of them just to stay top of mind, versus there's an actual story here to pitch.
So that's it. What makes a good story then? What's a good story?
Yeah, it's one of those things where I'll know it when I see it, kind of thing. But often I have to back clients down and say, I know you think this is the best thing since sliced bread, but it's just not. So let's not spend the time there. But then there are still plenty of good stories out there. What makes a good story is something that is new and really new, like it's different than anything that's been done before, even if it's kind of something that has been done before, but this is a very unique take on it. If there's something that's there's a local angle to a national organization or a national event or something like that, that's good material. You also have to have a really, a good face behind the story or behind the cause. So we always look for, that's why part of my, what's it called? My tagline is storytelling, because you got to be able to tell a story to illustrate your cause and get your point across. Just telling people what your organization does without sharing literally impact that it's made and who it's made it on, and being able to So
yeah, I work with a concept called the medicine and the cure. And so the cure is the outcomes, the impact, and the medicine is like how you do it. And people
Mhm.
tend to communicate with their medicine. And here's what we do, and not the cure, which is here's the difference that it makes, because people don't really care about what you do, or how it's done. They care about the
Yeah,
difference it makes. And but people who are
yeah,
inside nonprofits who do the medicine, right? Like they want people to know that. And like, yes, they can know it, but they know it in the context of the difference that it makes. And
yeah,
that, to me, that's what makes a good story, you know. Um,
yeah.
so let's, because I was, as you were talking, I'm thinking, okay, there's some people who are like, that sounds like there's so much to do. I can't ignore any aspect of this. And
Mhm.
like how can, or I don't know if this is something you can address, but if you
Mhm.
could, how can like a smaller shop, or like, I'm like a one person marketing shop, how can they
Mhm.
address all of these factors?
Mhm. Um, so you can repurpose content. People who are not as savvy in social media and don't have the expertise or the personnel or the time, to do a full-blown social media feed, I tell them, start simple. You can, Instagram links to Facebook, links to Twitter. You can do one post and boom, boom, boom. They all, you don't have to get super fancy and generate content constantly for different media. That's one way. And also you tell the same story, you're using the same content in different ways. So if, let's say, you get a great PR hit, a great newspaper story. Newspaper sounds like, what? There's still newspapers. Or a great online, magazine hit, and you want to share it with your clients. You take that, you post it on your website, you put it in your newsletter, you post about it on your social media with a link to it. So you're not creating different content for all these different channels. You're using the same content, um, and distributing it as many different ways as you
Right. So
can.
one story that you distribute many different
Yeah,
ways, instead of
yeah,
creating content like specific to this, specific to this.
yeah.
Yeah. Um, and I think that comprehensive view can also, yeah, make people feel like there's a lot less really to do. Um,
Mm-hmm.
okay, so I like that idea. Well, and then I do want to talk a little bit about how do you, okay, I had somebody on talk about marketing, and she said, good marketing looks easy and simple. Right? And that's
Yeah,
why people often don't value it. And then
yeah,
PR and then public
exactly.
relations, people often don't value it because it's hard to quantify, or qualify. So how can you quantify PR success? Like, what does that look like?
One of the biggest conundrums of our profession, for sure. um, it is, I mean, there are some quantitative things you can point to. How many people opened your e-newsletter? How many hits did you get on social media? How many retweets did it generate? Um, it gets less quantitative when you think about, okay, here's a newspaper article, or here's, my client was interviewed on a TV news channel, and then you have these guesstimates of how many people actually read the article, or how many people watched the TV news interview, or how many people listened to the radio show. So that becomes less precise. um, and then there's what I find much more, um not valuable, but there's the qualitative stuff that you can't really, um you can't quantify it, but it's that um amplify effect of, okay, we got a great newspaper article, I don't know if 3 people read it. I don't know if 300 people read it. I know what the circulation of my newspaper is, but how many people picked it up that day, or how many people read it online that I don't even know about. But then you take that article and you push it out through your social media. You put it in your e-newsletter. It lives on your website. You go for a grant application and you bring that article up and say, see, people are honoring what we do. We've got this great article that so that is a much harder thing to quantify, but that it's out there.
Right.
And in fact, I will give you an example again, but going back to the arts organization where royalty came. The nonprofit was absolutely forbidden from using their visit as a direct request for funds. Okay. It makes sense if you think about it, So they said, you cannot use them to raise money for your organization.
I get
that.
But
there was this perception that with all this media, I mean, we're talking worldwide media attention, right? Millions and millions of impressions. There's this perception, oh, they must be raising so much money from this. No.
Mm-hmm.
We were not allowed to make that direct ask. And secondly, what it did, it brought great attention and it brought great endorsement of the organization and great storytelling that was then later used to raise money. So was there a direct correlation between all this massive publicity and money pouring in? No.
Right.
And that's the hardest thing to tell people. It's like, then they go, well, why bother? Well, you bother because it gives you a worldwide stage. Mm-hmm. You can use it later. The awareness is just so much higher.
You're right.
And you have to tell people, look, we didn't make it, the money didn't pour in. You have to tell people that.
Right.
You make the ask, right?
Well, yeah, there's a lot of assumptions like, oh, if you're featured, you must have all this money.
Yeah.
And the thing is, the underlying assumption is we value what we can quantify. And if we only valued what we would quantify, there'd be very little that we value, because we value, that is the underlying thing for me is, well, we have to show it. And also, it's not always direct that way. Like what I say is you polish over here to shine over here. You know what I mean? Like it's like just like you can send out an e-news, you can send out your emails and all that. And I talk about like disrupting the field. Like, okay, you're putting it out into the field, like what you want, but that can come to you in so many ways. And you can't always make that direct line. No. And if that's what people are looking for, that's just not how it works.
No.
Like, that's not how anything works.
Exactly. And here's something super simple. You put out you put out a social media post about some event that you're having that, that's free. Like, come join us for whatever, Cyclovia for that matter, and people see it, but they don't necessarily come to that event. But you've generated awareness, and that maybe they'll do something else with your organization. And next time they see another event, they'll go, oh yeah, I'm so bummed I missed the last one. And so that stuff is just not quantifiable.
Right. It's just all seeds that you plant. And so when we look for that direct relationships, I tell that, this is one of my biggest things is you don't get to decide who or when, and we want to believe we do, but we don't. And so like to quantify means, well, then you think I have control over who or when, and I don't. All I can do is like, promote yourself. You're strong in your mission and message to call forward like-minded people, but then that's it. Because if I could decide who or when, trust me, right?
Well, that's called advertising,
and I would, and they don't even get to decide who or when. Like they
don't.
If really we had a way to control someone else's behavior, like we can't. We know what we can do to sort of account for that. But I mean, I'm just saying
Yeah.
it's quantifying that itself is often a not a great way to look at things, but that's
Yeah.
what we're taught because we lower the risk and feel confident.
Yeah.
And that's about our own internal. See, this is what I
Yeah.
do. That's about our own internal triggers that we need to quantify things instead of a
Mhm.
trust, right? Just
That,
trust that it's working and that things will come to you.
and that the word trust, I was just, what was going through my mind as you're talking about this is to talk about what the ideal client, who the ideal client is. The ideal client is somebody who puts their trust in the PR person or the marketing or the comms person, because we go by many different titles, and lets us do our job and lets us navigate the PR universe and you know pathway as it comes to us. Sure, there are certain things that we know how to do and there's tools and all that, but we don't know exactly how it's going to go, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so the client has to put their trust in us that we are going to do the best job that we can possibly do with how things transpire in the PR world, as we're doing a PR campaign. And to not constantly look for, well, when is this going to pay off? And why hasn't this happened yet? And why haven't we raised $1 million after we launched that PR campaign 3 weeks ago?
Mm-hmm.
And that's a, just let us do our job.
Yeah,
if you trust us enough to hire us, let us do
right.
our job,
Trust
and
the
we will
process.
guide
Mhm.
you. Trust the process. Yeah.
Yeah, that is trust is a huge thing and that and like just the allowing for things to take hold and it just takes
Yeah.
time. It
Yeah.
takes time to make an impression in the marketplace. It takes
Yep.
time. And
It's a foundation building
it
process.
is. Yeah.
Yeah.
And it may pay off soon. It may take a while. And that's what I see a lot of times is people they get impatient and then they'll try something else. Well, obviously this isn't working, so let's try this. And so
Yeah.
one of your jobs is probably just to hold people in that space of
Yeah.
because there's a time when you're going to put out more than you're going to get back. And
Oh
that's
yeah.
and that's holding people in that when they're like, yeah, it's working. Trust me. It just hasn't gotten back to us yet.
Yeah.
Okay, I
Yeah.
want to talk a little bit about crisis PR, which everyone's afraid of. And we sort of need. So what can how do you help nonprofits? What can they do to manage a crisis? Like how do you help people with in that?
Well, there's a couple of different ways. If there's somebody who, if there's a client that is really proactive and likes to be prepared, then you can put together a whole crisis PR plan. And there are some organizations that just demand, I mean, you have to. This is not a nonprofit, but I wrote a crisis communication plan many, many years ago for an airline, right? I also work with a lot of schools, some of them public schools, some of them independent schools, and they need to have crisis plans,
Mm-hmm.
crisis communication plans. So there's that where you have the basic structure, it sits on a shelf. God forbid you need it, you pull it out and you again adjust as needed because who knows
Yep.
what that crisis is in the moment. But you have your basic framework for a plan. And then there's the crises that aren't expected. And then you jump in and you do what is necessary. There's some and of course crises come in all different forms, like we talked about. I mean, I've worked crises where a business burned to the ground overnight. I've worked crises where, like I was talking about, leadership transition, where you have some run-up time to prepare for that. I've also had a leadership transition crisis where there was next to no time because a very charismatic leader who had not been on the job for very long was about to get let go. And things were happening very quickly, and the community that this person was in had a tendency to scoop the organization by like posting on social media, and we knew that. So I told the client, I'm like, we need to really, really get ahead of this. And we didn't know how we didn't know if this particular person was going to take the opportunity to resign, or if that particular person was going to be asked to leave. And we had communication prepared either direction.
Gotcha.
And ready to go the second the decision was made, so that we couldn't get scooped by the community. And then there's crises where somebody does something wrong, right? And those are the worst, of course. But there's some basic rules in that, which the first is you acknowledge, you apologize. How do I make it right? You show empathy, and you tell the truth. You tell the truth no matter how bad it is. Now, I also, like to coach clients. You don't need to tell the whole truth. And there are ways that first there's some legalities, first there's some personal issues. You don't need to reveal everything, but you do need to tell the truth, and you certainly need to not lie. And one of the worst things that you can do in a crisis is to say no comment. Now, there are 17 different ways to say no comment, but those two words send a signal that I'm not talking because I'm guilty. Right. And so there's multiple ways to say no comment. One is, there's legal issues pending. We can't talk about it in a public forum, or we haven't informed the family about there's depending on the situation, there's ways to say it, but those two words are kind of, a terrible signal.
Yeah. It automatically, it just says, I don't, we automatically hear,
I'm not willing to talk.
I'm not willing. Yeah. Something shady's going on here. That's what, no comment. Oh, then there must be something wrong going on.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. So we had, so I'm in St. Louis, and on Tuesday, this is, we're recording this on Wednesday, that yesterday, Monday night, we had 10 inches of rain in a one night, and it caused flash flooding all over. And flash flooding is crazy because because there was so much water coming down that the sewer system couldn't absorb it, and stuff backed up. Like, with literally 10 minutes, people had 6 feet of water.
I live in LA. It never rains in LA. And right. So that's what happened.
Yeah, being right. So we actually have systems to work, but just so much rain that the system couldn't handle it. And one of the nonprofits that, so I do animal stuff, but one of them is called Gateway Pet Guardians. Now, they didn't flood, but the county animal shelter where they are flooded, and all the dogs were in danger. And actually there were some puppies that wound up, anyway, it was horrible. And so Gateway Pet Guardians flips into action, gets all the dogs, gets people to foster all the dogs, get all the dogs out of their shelter so they could take the flooded shelter. They were on the front page of the paper yesterday for doing this. And I'm just saying, that stuff can happen anytime, right? And that's a crisis and an opportunity, right? Because it's a crisis, but also it's an opportunity for them to demonstrate their their responsiveness, their commitment to the community, their willingness. And they had people literally lined up out the door to foster the dogs that were in their shelter, and so that they could and to donate supplies. And I thought, okay, because a crisis isn't the crisis and opportunity, the yin and yang of it, because a crisis isn't always a horrible thing. Right. And also, it can happen just like that in a flash flood. Yeah. And not to sit and look for the horrible things, but to just know if something crazy happens, you have a way of responding. Yeah. Because at any time somebody could say something stupid and have to, I worked with this client a couple of years ago, and he just said something that was, he had a stumble of words and then it came off racial, and it was not a good situation. Somebody picked it up, and then the more you deny it, the more steam the story gets. right?
Yeah.
And and anyway, I'm just saying, like, it's like almost like a flash flood in a sense of
Yeah.
it can just happen
Yeah.
through no fault of your own, where,
Yeah.
oh my God, now my nonprofit is flooded. How am I how and to have a roadmap for how to navigate
Hmm.
talking with people about it when you're in
Hmm.
crisis, when it's hard to have that rational,
Yeah.
right? Because everyone's up
Let me,
when it was crazy.
yeah. If I can address that too, people often don't understand, even if it's an organization that is big enough to have a comms department to begin with, you know, they don't understand why you would bring in somebody, a crisis expert. Part of it is that objectivity, because the people who are on the ground may be traumatized, they may be
Right.
overwhelmed, they may not have that rational thinking. You got somebody coming in from the outside who can see all the different angles, who can see all the different perspectives, and who has those basic steps that you take in a crisis. And there's a lot of them. You have to have your spokesperson, you have to have your talking points, you have to have those basic rules of tell the truth, and um, uh, make sure you communicate with everybody and in multiple ways. You've got to get your message out. I worked the 9/11 crisis at no warning whatsoever, of course. I was in conversation with an association called the International Association of Professional Security Consultants. So it's a nonprofit organization. It's a
Got it. Right.
membership organization.
Right.
And I was in conversation about doing some PR for them. And I was scheduled to go meet with them at their annual meeting and present my proposal, et cetera, et cetera. Then that was supposed to be 3 weeks after 9/11, and then 9/11 hit. And I called the president of the association. I said, I think I need to start working for you right now. And he said, yeah, just work. We'll figure it out later. Just start working. And I did. And we were able to, and this is pre-social media, right? 2001.
Mhm.
Um, I was fielding media calls and farming people out for interviews, and it was just like that. And again, no warning, but
Right.
I knew how to manage it. Yeah.
Leadership, like, and thought leadership like that, so just requires you to step up, even,
Yeah.
and because respond to their urgency, um and not always your right, like, like, hey, this is an opportunity for us. We're being called into speaking up. Like, we had a lot of,
Yeah.
because I live in St. Louis. When Ferguson in 2014, we had a lot of
Yeah.
nonprofits who were called into leadership, like, to speak out around the things that were happening in our community. And that was a crisis, again, an unexpected thing. Like, okay, we're being called to speak out about certain things.
Mhm.
And there's the Deaconess Foundation, which was one of my clients a long time ago, but they did such a good job of really stepping into leadership. And in fact, the
Yeah.
director now is the director of the National Children's Defense Fund. That's where he went after that. So that's what an impact
Mhm.
that he made,
Yeah.
stepping up into the truth of it,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And just speaking the truth, even if people aren't going to like it. And that's a other thing. All
Yeah.
right. We're getting, or I want to running out of time here. So I
Okay.
want to just, is there anything else you want to share, that you would love nonprofits to know about PR and communication?
Yeah. I think it's to reiterate some of the points that we already made. It takes time, trust the process, and stay in front of your audiences. And that requires PR.
Right. Awesome. Okay. Now, my last question, though, if you do, I don't know if you got to the end. So my last question is, I love karaoke. And if I'm never in Culver City or you're ever in St. Louis and we wind up at a karaoke bar, the divier the better for me. I like it when everything's just a little bit broken, makes me feel at home. Um, what's your go-to karaoke song?
Oh gosh. I just did karaoke recently for a
Did you?
fundraiser.
Yay.
So yeah. Um I'm going to forget the name of the song, but there's the fabulous Hamilton song sung by King George. I'll be back.
You'll be back. Yeah.
You'll be back. You'll be back. I love
Oh,
that.
that's
Yeah.
okay.
That's a new one.
That's a
There's
new one.
plenty of,
Yes.
you know, I also love, oh God, Tina Turner.
Rolling on the river.
Yes.
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 Oh, awesome. There you go.
Yeah.
Okay, we got our lineup set. Those are good. You got an oldie and a goodie, and then a new one.
We not only have some divey bars like you described, we have a ton of community backyard karaoke. So when you're here,
that sounds
we'll hit one of those. In
like
fact,
a whole next level of fun. People just do karaoke in their backyard.
Yeah. Yeah.
Don't, okay. My husband's gonna be panicking right now. Like, no, we're not having karaoke in the backyard. All right. Well, Joanna, thank you so much for coming on and for sharing. And if people want to get in touch with you, it's Joanna at brody-pr.com, right?
Correct.
And I will, all your social media handles and your website, all be in the show notes. So if people want to get in touch with you, they can reach. What's your website?
www.brody-pr.com.
Awesome.
Brody Public Relations also gets you there, but Brody-PR is the
all right. And
LinkedIn, you know, that's where I spend most of my time.
All right, you're right. That's where I met you, was on LinkedIn.
Yeah.
You have really good LinkedIn content. So follow her on LinkedIn, and all of that'll be in the show notes, so you can find that. And that's it for us today. Again, if you have not yet, you can download your Up-Level Your Influence Starter Kit. You can go to influentialnonprofit.com and throw me your email, and I give you all kinds of goodies on how to create more influence in your life to get people that you have no authority over to do what you want them to do. Isn't that a great thing to be able to do? It's an amazing skill to have.
I have authority over my teens, and I can't get them to do whatever.
I know, right? I do use this on my children. All of these skills I do use on my kids.
Yeah,
it helps. But one of my coaches says family's the Olympics, right? So I coach and train people on how to do this, and then sometimes my husband will say something to me, and I'm just like, you know, what is wrong with you? Like, I forget everything I've ever known. So family's the Olympics, but yes, it does work on kids too.
Yeah.
All right, everybody, we'll see you next time on the Influential Nonprofit.